As far as headphones are concerned, this is pretty niche. Let's check it out. This is the Audio-Technica ATH-ADX5000. Let's start off with building comfort. So this might be one of the lightest headphones I've ever held, alongside the Shure 1850. It looks a lot like the rest of the headphones in its lineup, with the exception of this different headband. The adjustment mechanisms on the side are very satisfying, very crisp, but listen to that. That sounds nice. They tilt, they swivel, though I wish they tilted just a little bit more out, as when I have these on my head, I get a little bit more pressure on the top than on the bottom. I take my glasses off. The only way that I can solve this is by pulling the headband up just a little bit higher than I'd like it to be, and then they seal around the bottom too. The pads are reasonably large on their inner diameter and reasonably deep, but not crazy huge. I would say in pretty much all aspects of the pads, they are just big enough and just deep enough, but no more. The headband has minimal padding, but also takes up a very small footprint, as they're just two thin bars, and it's very lightweight. I do really like the material that they're made out of though. The metal on the chassis, while thin, does seem pretty nice. I like the finishing on it, and you can tell that these grills on the side are stamped. The driver on the inside is very, very decorative, especially in the light. You don't see any wires, you don't see anything that doesn't look intentional. You can see Japan made on the side here too. It's a very pretty headphone, especially under the grill. I also think this is one of the stupidest connections you can put on the bottom of a headphone. I mean, I'm sure there's some benefit to it, but why not just 3.5mm? All this does really is make it harder for people to get aftermarket cables or replace a cable if it breaks. The stock cable isn't bad, but it does retain a lot of memory, so if you have it curled up when it's stored, it's gonna stay curly when you have it plugged in. With all that said, let's talk about subjective sound, and then we'll get into objective sound with frequency response. Now, this is where it gets a little bit messy. The ATX5000 is bright. It is very, very bright. It does not have much bass, does not extend very deep. It is a headphone that I would describe as shrill. It's detailed, but not exceptionally so. Detailed enough to be a high-end headphone, yes, but it doesn't stand out. It can be sibilant, timbre suffers as the timbre is very thin sounding, strings sound thin, vocals sound thin, drums sound thin, but the one benefit being that everything sounds very airy and very spacious. It has good staging, not as crazy as something like the ATH-ADX5000, but definitely staging that sets it a little bit apart from the competition. And the airiness on top of that definitely helps. The other thing that I'll note about this is that it has an extremely fast attack and decay. You would think with those factors it would be more detailed than it is, but it's not. However, we do get a great level of articulation. Everything happens quick, it's over and done with, and it is on to the next note. It does this very effortlessly. As a result of that, dynamics are pretty good as well. But the best thing this headphone does, and the one trait that really does set it apart, is imaging. This images fantastically. I tried using this for playing a video game, and it actually started to drive me nuts because in the game I could slightly hear my left and right foot going back and forth as I was walking. Like to the point where I was just sitting there hearing it as I'm moving forward, going left, right, left, right, left, right. And I was like, gosh, I gotta take this off. If you want really good directional imaging and you want a lot of air, well, there you go. ATX5000 does that pretty well. But for me, the timbre, the really bright overall sound, the lack of bass, that's a lot of trade-offs. What we end up with is a headphone that is extremely niche. I'll talk about this more in conclusions, but first let's talk about objective and frequency response. Now looking at this, you would think that there is some bass, but you can tell how quick the sub bass rolls off. The big point here to compare to is the level of bass compared to the level of that bump around 1.2K and then the treble above that. The frequency response of this is basically 3 big bumps. It's not the most exaggerated mountain range I've ever seen, but it is definitely the silhouette of a mountain range if I've ever seen one. Which, hey, I'm not trying to crap on this headphone. There are things I've measured that are way worse than this. But this is also an expensive headphone. Like, it is not cheap at all. And you know, this might be exactly what you're looking for, but for me, it is not. You can definitely see and hear where all the air is coming from, and you can also tell why this is a bit shrill in the vocals, because that elevation at 1.2 kilohertz, that's not a small elevation. Amplification does help this in some cases, but the vast majority of amplifiers really don't fix my complaints with this headphone. What I will say though, is that this is probably the perfect headphone for someone looking for something extremely niche. There are people I come across who are looking for very, very specific traits in the gear they buy. If the traits you're after are brightness, an extremely airy sound, fantastic imaging, and something very light, ATH-5000 actually makes sense. But I feel like for a lot of people, the rest of the factors this headphone has are deal breakers. So I'm going to make a different recommendation. Something that costs less than this and is much more well-rounded across the board, and that's the Aria Stealth. If you want something that is just overall much more well-balanced, you get the Aria Stealth. And if you want something that is still kind of bright-leaning, but you want better performance in pretty much every other metric, including soundstage, why not just get the HT800S? This is just not quite as good as the HT800S in nearly every category, and the HT800S fills a very similar niche as this headphone. So if you own this, I mean, hey, you probably enjoy it. Keep enjoying it. Don't let my opinion change the way you feel about this headphone, because at the end of the day, it's my opinion. But if you're shopping for this, look at the HT800S instead if this sounds like something you might want. And otherwise, if you're just in this price bracket looking for a really solid headphone, look at the Aria Stealth, because it is just A+. So with all of that said, I think it's time to wrap up this video. Guys, if you liked it, please leave a like down below, a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can over on the forums. And as always, don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Till the next one, guys. Peace.